So I'm a roofer. I was subcontracted to do a job out in the middle of nowhere. My usual reluctance with jobs of this sort was voiced when I spoke on the phone with the contractor. My tune changed, however, when I was told of the amount that I would make on this job. 20 grand. I used to make that in a year when I was first out of college, and now I had the chance to make that amount in under a week. Now, I'm going to make this clear. I have no fear of heights. I'm in reasonable shape, all that, and then some. The job wasn't too steep, but it was big. 200 bundles plus type big. My reluctance was born out of the location, or, for this matter, the lack thereof. I've always had a fear of being alone in the middle of nowhere, ever since I went camping with my dad when I was a kid. During the trip, we went on a hike and we got separated. I was found not even 15 minutes later, but that fear was imprinted forever in my mind. I set my alarm for 4 a.m. and then started prepping everything I would need for work the next day. By 7, I was at the job site, having left the house after stretching and eating breakfast at 5. It was a long drive, 2 hours. For most, it would probably have taken them 2.5, as I like to be at work as quickly as possible. As I neared the job site, an inexplicable feeling of dread began to invade my senses, coming out of nowhere. My brow furrowed with concentration as I tried to make sense of what could possibly be happening. I was deep in thought as I pulled into the mud pit that constituted the driveway. It had rained the night previous, so mud was imminent. The entire countryside was shrouded in a thick, unrelenting fog. I grabbed the necessary tools and set them up on the tailgate of my truck, adding cleats to the mix, and then went inside the shell of the house to find an outlet in the basement to plug my compressor into. It took a few minutes of hunting, but I finally located one in which to provide enough power for the compressor. I ran the extension cord back outside to where my compressor sat, hose already dangling from the edge. The compressor slowly started up, the power load being used obviously not quite enough. It eventually smoothed out by the time I made it halfway up the ladder. I prepped the edges and the valleys, then started to fill in the rest of the roof. I now walked up to the peak where the bundles of shingles were neatly stacked and removed my cleats. The roof was still damp, but now that the bottom edge was shingled, I was free and safe to walk about and do my job. 2 hours had passed since my arrival, and the fog showed no signs of lifting. That wasn't a bother to me. What did bother me was when my compressor blew a fuse, something I hadn't noticed until my nail gun started malfunctioning, with the nails only going halfway in. I sighed. Perhaps this fog was going to be an issue after all, muffling the noise all around me. I now had to climb down the ladder, turn off the compressor, drain the thing, reset the fuse, and then flip the switch, hoping that it would start to run. All of this would only take about 2 minutes, but now that I had to waste my time, I now added an extra hour to my day. I completed the process, being rewarded by a monotonous, loud hum. Just before I flicked the switch, though, I heard a peculiar noise from the field just west of the job site. It wasn't too important to me, however. The job at hand was a higher priority, so I went up and got back to work. 20 minutes later, I heard the noise again, louder this time, as if it had to make itself heard over the racket of the compressor. I stopped and turned to look out into the field. What I saw there petrified me. The fog just at the limit of my outer vision had turned a flickering orange. I shuddered and watched as the glow brightened ever so slowly. I still couldn't see the source of the mysterious glow. With nothing else to do, I decided to go back to work, occasionally stealing a glance to the west. The source of the glow finally revealed itself at approximately the third glance. There was what seemed to be an army of something at the head of the glow. I turned back to the roof and began to install another shingle, and then froze as I stole one last glance back at the field. I could see now that it was indeed an army of the dead. It was as if all the occupants of hell itself had come back and were out for blood. Is this a dream? I thought. Everything felt too real for it to be a dream. I slowly redirected my attention back to the task at hand, slightly distracted. My phone then rang. Answering, I noted that the time was now 7 p.m. and it was getting dark. It was a wrong number. I looked back at what I had accomplished, and my heart sank. I had hardly made any progress since getting the edges and valleys prepped that morning. I hadn't even eaten all day. I felt so disheartened, the knowledge of all the extra work I would have ahead of me. I packed up and got in my truck in a daze. Before descending the ladder, though, I took one last look at the field to the west. The glow remained static, appearing as though the army of the dead had stopped and made camp for the night, the distance covered proving too much to travel in one day. The next day went the same as the day previous, the only difference being that the compressor did not stop working at all. The first thing I did was look out into the field off to the west, still shrouded in fog. The glow was still present. This disturbed me to a level I thought an impossibility. Despite this, I decided to keep working. I made up for the wasted time yesterday faster than normal. I stopped to eat, and as I ate, I could hear an inaudible sound breaking the silence from the fog. The sound being inaudible was the key here. I couldn't hear it per se, but I could hear it in my mind. There was a cacophony of voices and a small crackle, which I soon recognized as the crackle of fire. I finished eating, I threw the rest of my food out the window of the truck, having lost my appetite, and climbed the ladder, preparing to work. I decided to check my phone, and then shivered. It was 7 p.m. once again, nearly dark. I had originally checked my phone when I went down to eat. That was at 3 p.m. I had lost 4 hours. I had no choice but to pack up and return to work tomorrow. When I arrived the next day, the first thing I did was go up on the roof and look to the west. The glow was ridiculously bright now, and I could see that the army of the dead was camped out nearly at the entrance to the job site. I had arrived at the job around 7:03, and when my trance was broken, I checked my phone and found it to be 7 p.m. once again. Something's wrong here. I have to call in a friend to help me out. I have no choice, as the job needs to be completed, and at this point, I would miss the deadline if I didn't have any help. I climbed down the ladder and got in my truck to make the drive home. On my way, I called up an old friend, Mike, to ask for his help. He agreed, and we set the time to start at 7 a.m. My sleep was plagued with nightmares that night, visions of hell and the like. After waking up for the third time around 3 a.m., I gave up and decided to get ready for work. I arrived there at 6 a.m., and the sky was still dark, but full of fog. The only light that was visible was the orange glow, now bright enough that I realized I could start working. A truck pulled into the driveway. Mike got out, seeing his friend's truck already parked with all the tools and such set up.
"Hey Rob, you up there?"
called Mike. There was no answer, save for the whistling as the wind blew around the edges of the roof and the monotonous hum of the compressor.
"Yeah, I'm gonna hook up into your compressor and I'm coming on up,"
said Mike as he collected his things and walked over to the ladder. He made it to the top and looked around, with Rob nowhere in sight. A hose and gun were set up near the peak of the roof, air hissing slightly from a leaky hose end.
"Hey Rob?"
Mike walked around the roof looking for his friend. Finding him nowhere in sight, Mike decided that there was nothing better to do than start working. A sound interrupted his work, the hum of the compressor. It halted moments after starting. A fog had rolled in maybe an hour ago, but Mike didn't notice until now. He shook his head in irritation, but then froze as his head turned westward, looking into the field across the road. There was a glow just at the edge of his vision. He climbed back down the ladder and reset the compressor. He climbed back up and noticed that the glow was upon him. The contractor arrived on site after receiving news of a fire that had engulfed the new build that the roofers were supposed to have started 2 weeks ago. After many phone calls, the contractor decided to drive over and check things out, and that was when he got the phone call. When he pulled into the driveway, he saw the 2 trucks parked near the burned-out shell of the building. He noticed the roof, now half collapsed from the obvious fire damage. He could see a singed hose dangling near the peak of the roof. It was almost finished, with half of the capping already installed on the peak. For no good reason, in a state of shock, the contractor climbed the ladder. As he reached the top, the damaged roof suddenly mended and a thick fog materialized around him. This went unnoticed by the contractor, who was distracted by an orange glow off in the distance to the west. 3 confirmed dead in a house fire. The local fire department was called late last Thursday to a fire that had started at a new home under construction just out of town. The remains of 3 people had been found in the wreckage, burned beyond recognition. Those who called into the fire department described the fire as something right from the pits of hell. Fire and police officials are working to identify the remains as well as the cause of the fire. Update. The fire was found to be caused by faulty wiring in the motor housing of the compressor used by the two roofers, Rob Westbrook and Mike Stauntz. The third set of remains is still unidentified as of this time, and any of those who have information are urged to contact local authorities as soon as possible.